The wind swept across the wide plains of Dust Creek, carrying with it the smell of sagebrush, rain that never came, and the whisper of stories that townsfolk never told out loud. The land stretched endless, golden and dry, like the heart of every man who'd lost something he couldn't name. It was there, under the red sun and the long shadow of the canyon ridge, that Bo Ralston rode slow, his horse tired and his eyes heavier than the dust on his boots. Bo wasn't a cruel man, but he was one who'd done what he must to survive. Once a rancher with a family and land, he'd lost it all to drought, to bankers, and to the kind of bad luck that turns a good man into a ghost walking in daylight. So when he came upon the auction, he hadn't gone to buy a soul, only to see how low the world had sunk. But sometimes destiny doesn't knock. It grabs you by the collar. They said she was a giant of a woman, tall as a man on horseback, strong enough to lift a wagon wheel and silent as the grave. Folks called her Annah, though no one knew her full name. She'd been brought in from the northern ranges, part of a deal gone bad, a debt her kin couldn't pay. When the foreman called her the lot, laughter rippled through the crowd, cruel and nervous, but when she stepped forward barefoot in the dust, the laughter died. Her presence was thunder in a still sky, her eyes a storm that could break a man's will. She looked like she didn't belong to this world, too proud to beg, too fierce to bow. And Bo Ralston, standing in that crowd, saw something in her, a piece of his own lost soul staring back. When the bidding started, no one dared go high. Who'd want a woman like that, too strong to control, too silent to charm? But Bo raised his hand once and then again, until the hammer fell and the crowd murmured that the old rancher had lost his mind. He hadn't lost his mind, only remembered what it felt like to stand for something. When they told Annah she was his, she didn't speak. She only looked him dead in the eyes, as if weighing the measure of the man who'd just bought her freedom with silver and silence. On the ride back to his ranch, neither said a word. The sky burned orange above them, the land endless as regret. When they reached the broken fence line and the sagging barn, Bo dismounted and said quietly, "Ain't much, but it's home." Annah looked around him at the dying grass, the empty corral, the house missing a roof beam, and nodded once. That night, as coyotes cried and the wind howled through the dry boards, Bo sat by the fire and wondered why he'd done it. She sat across from him, silent, her shadow long on the wall. Days turned into weeks. Annah worked like the land was part of her, lifting feed sacks, mending fences, moving hay bales twice her weight. She barely spoke, but every motion was full of purpose. Bo began to see her not as a debt, but as a force that breathed life into the dying ranch. Townsfolk started talking. "That's the Ralston woman," they'd whisper at the general store, the one he bought. But when they saw her walk through town, tall, strong, unbothered, no one dared say it to her face. Something about her made men lower their eyes and women straighten their backs. Bo found himself watching her in the quiet moments, the way she'd stare at the horizon as if waiting for something, or how she'd hum low songs to the horses when she thought no one listened. Once, after fixing a fence together, he said, "You work harder than any man I've hired." She replied simply, "You paid for me. I pay it back." The words hit him harder than he cared to admit. He wanted to tell her she owed him nothing, that the silver wasn't the price of a person. But he couldn't find the right words, maybe because deep down he didn't yet believe it himself. Then came the night of the storm. The sky turned black and thunder rolled over Dust Creek like judgment. The barn door flew open in the wind and Bo ran out to tie it shut. Annah was already there, wrestling the gate with her bare hands, lightning flashing across her face like some ancient god come to earth. When it was done and they stumbled back into the house, soaked and breathless, Bo looked at her, really looked, and said, "You ain't what I expected." She met his gaze and said quietly, "Neither are you." It was the first time he saw her smile, small and fleeting, like sunlight through rain. After that, something shifted. The silence between them softened. She began to tell him bits of her story, how her family had sold their claim north after the winter took their herd, how she'd been promised to a man who broke his word, how she'd been treated like a possession until she decided she'd rather be nothing than owned. Bo listened, shame burning in his chest, because he realized that, in buying her, he'd done the same. But Annah didn't look at him with hate and only understanding, like she knew what it was to do wrong for the right reason. As summer stretched on, Dust Creek began to whisper again. Not about the auction, but about the miracle out at Ralston's ranch. Fences fixed, crops green, cattle fat. Folks said it was luck. Bo knew better. It was her. Annah, the woman who worked like the earth itself owed her a living. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted her in gold, Bo said quietly, "You've done more here than I ever could." She turned, that same calm fire in her eyes, and said, "You didn't buy me, Bo, you just gave me a place to start." That night, as the stars came out over the plains, Bo sat by the window watching her tend the lantern outside. He thought of all the things he'd lost, and his pride, his land, his hope, and how somehow, in the middle of all that ruin, a woman he didn't understand had given him reason to start again. The words rose in his throat, but he didn't speak them. Not yet. Some truths need the right time. And out there in the dark, Annah looked up at the same stars and whispered to herself, "I ain't a debt, I'm a life." Her voice was quiet, but the wind carried it across the empty land like a promise. The next morning, Bo found a small carving on the porch post. A horse, rough but strong, made from pine. Beneath it, one line burned into the wood. "Freedom can't be bought, only earned." He stood there a long time, the sunrise lighting the plains, realizing that maybe he hadn't bought a woman at all. Maybe he'd been the one rescued from his own emptiness. And somewhere deep down, he knew something was coming. Something that would test what they'd built. Something that would either break them or bind them forever. Because in Dust Creek, every piece was just a pause before the storm.